It is 6 p.m., so I'm calling the regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of March 8th to order. Just for courtesy, anyone who has a cell phone, please put it on silent or vibrate. Thank you. We have all commissioners present, so let's move on to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on the agenda is citizen comment period, and we have one individual signed up, Mr. Voller. When you come up, besides stating your name, would you give your address, and then after your comments, if you'll sign a sheet that's over by, nope, not on this one? Oh, because you signed here. Very good. Sorry.
No problem. All right, well, thank you for letting citizens comment on things that the city's thinking about undertaking. The purpose of me being here, first of all, my name is Jim Voller. I'm an attorney in Garden Ridge. I have a law firm here. Some of you might be my clients, I'm not sure, but I have my family here. In fact, I have something unique. My daughter, who is 13, she was born in Garden Ridge, right over here. Yeah, so I shouldn't have her stand up. Anyway, she was born at home in Garden Ridge, one of the few people like that. But I came here because I heard that the city was going to pass this ordinance, or consider passing it, and I was concerned about something. So as a lawyer, I'm concerned about property rights, and I'm concerned about the way that our country was developed. And personal property and property rights are intrinsic in our rights as Americans. I should look at the time remaining. So anyway, government retains the ultimate power to take property, but it protects Americans and their rights to retain their property without arbitrary exercise of the power to regulate, to take. There's no more profound statement about the American system of laws and government than that private land ownership is intrinsic privileges exist separate and apart from the government as natural rights. So these natural rights may not be seized without justification or compensation. So what I'm talking about is this ordinance includes a restriction on short-term rentals. So if you restrict my property rights to stop short-term rentals, you've taken away something from me that's of intrinsic value to me. And so the purpose of me being here is because I'm wanting to urge you that there's been several cases in Texas, and if you're, sorry, I think it's page 47 or something of the ordinance that says something about property rights, says something about the city being able to regulate short-term rentals. And so my concern is that if you pass this, you're going to be in this position where you're going to be against what settled case laws. Right now, there's been three different cities, one up in Fort Worth, Austin, actually New Braunfels. These cases have all, the cities that came along and said, let's restrict short-term rentals. And they've gone to court because some people wanted to do short-term rentals. And in each case, the property owner has been successful, or it's in the process of being litigated. And so in Timberwood Park, for example, the homeowners association tried to limit someone's property rights to do short-term rentals. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court of Texas. All the way up, the courts were saying, you can do this, you can do this. And the Supreme Court unanimously said, you can't do this. And so if you restrict short-term rentals, you will not be successful. And I'll come back later and address this when I have another opportunity to speak. And I have some case law here. I'll pass that out later too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will move on to business items. 5A, which is approval of minutes for February 8th, 2021. I take it all the commissioners have read the minutes from the last meeting, and if you have no corrections, could I have a motion?
I motion.
So we have a motion for approval of the minutes of February 8th. Do we have a second?
I'll second
Oh,
it.
go ahead.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Moving on to the next item, we have items applicable to Planning and Zoning Commission discussed at the February City Council meeting, including possible update on FM 2252 sewer project and TxDOT FM 2252 expansion. I'm pretty sure all the commissioners were either present at the meeting or viewed it online, so I'm just going to quickly give you a little bit of information from Tri-Hydro. They have started the design of the water line relocation along FM 2252. And TxDOT provided an updated schematic for the extended project limits through the intersection of FM 2252 and FM 3009, and the updated drainage design. Tri-Hydro is in the process of designing the water line relocation at the intersection of FM 2252 and FM 3009. Will Lockett, who is also with TxDOT, did give a little bit of good information, actually, and while it's not specific to planning and zoning, he did talk about the bridge project at 2252, which I know the commission and residents are really hopeful that this stays on track. And he stated that they're looking to complete the current project by the end of the summer. And the larger expansion project, which would be for the bridge over the railroad tracks on FM 2252, would probably not be completed, or maybe it was started, until May of 2023. So those were the two main things that I think is of importance to us. Do I have any questions? Okay. Now we will move to the petition by Sean M. Willis on behalf of Pension Mark, San Antonio, for the issuance of a special use permit for Phase 1 for construction and operation of a one-story, 11,725 square foot office and retail building with associated sidewalks, parking spaces, driveways, and detention pond on the property zone Neighborhood Services B1, located at 19243 FM 2252, Garden Ridge, Texas. Further described as a 4.23 acre tract of land lying in the Section 96 Abstract 120 of the George M. Dolson Survey, Comal County, Texas, being all of a remaining portion of 4,402 acre tract of land described to Vaquero Grande LLC, a Texas limited liability company, recorded in document 201-906-028-430 of the official public records of Garden Ridge, of Comal County. The property is further located on the east side of FM 2252 across from Hickory Bend in Garden Ridge. Do we need to see if Sean Willis wants to come to the front and give us any information before we do the public hearing?
evening, Commission. My name is Sean Willis. I'm with Accuform Architecture. Nothing has changed from the previous plans that you've seen on the design. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. The only thing that has changed is we've removed the drive-through from the project. There's no longer a drive-through on the project any longer. So other than that, the design of the building, the orientation of the building, parking is relatively remained the same. So. Okay.
At 6:10 p.m., I would like to open a public hearing on this matter. If we have anyone who would like to speak, you may come up to the microphone. Marissa, do we have any comments that were submitted?
No, we have no written comments.
Okay. So if there is no one else or no one who would like to speak and we don't have any written comments, I will close the public hearing at 6:11 p.m. On to the commission for any discussion or questions to Mr. Willis.
Mr. Willis, looking through the application, I see that the total square footage of the building is 11,725 square feet, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And of that unoccupied space, as you had presented to us at this time, is 5,340 square feet.
I believe that's
approximately.
Put me again.
And
Yes.
we're interested, I think the city and the commission are interested in the use of that space down the line within limits for retail. We'd like to generate some kind of tax base. You heard me say this before when you came before. So you knew I was going to say something, one way or the other. How aggressively have you guys pursued that?
We still have no current prospects, tenants, or for any of that space yet. So
For any of the space or for the retail space, potential retail space?
for any of it,
Any, okay.
The only space that's being finished out right now is the owner space, the pension mark space.
Okay. And looking at the schematic, I also saw before, had back access of the property to Naco Loop. Is that still on the plan?
Not in phase one.
Not in phase
So-
one?
Yeah, once he decides to move on with phase two, that will be added at that time.
So I'm thinking the latter part, the back part of that property that's on Naco Loop over near Door Lane is going to be phase two, or is that going to be broken into 2 and 3, or what?
It's probably going to be phase two, but it could be phase three. It all depends how he
So he doesn't have-
decides to develop the property
So he
later.
has no concrete plans at this time?
No.
Okay, so we don't know if there's going to be access from Naco Loop at all? And that was my next question, we're at the rest of the land. I'd like to put it out there so the owners would consider possibly making some of that space a pedestrian open space, such as a park, square, a green or a plaza or something like that. Just throwing it out there.
Okay.
Now, I know it may not be worth it in the long run, but I'd like it to be considered. And lastly, this is one of my pet peeves, when we started this, started looking at the building over there, we know we're going to have some parking lots, and we're going to have some parking spaces. And I'm sure you, having been before us before, know exactly how many parking spaces you're supposed to have per tenant and square footage and everything else. My question is, having had multiple automobiles banged up in parking lots, how wide are the parking spaces going to be?
The
There's
parking-
someplace- How wide are the parking spaces going to be? There's some places I go and park, and I have no problem at all getting in and out of my car without banging the guy next to me and vice versa. And other places where I have to look for something further out in the lot. I'd like, in my mind, my vision for Garden Ridge is to have wide parking spaces so people are welcomed to come to the tenants and the businesses and not worry about their car getting banged up all the time. Do you know right off top of your head, you probably don't know right off the top. Well, you drew it up, so you may know.
I drive a big truck, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right?
But the spaces are the standard width. They're 9 feet wide by 18 foot deep. The access aisle between the spaces where the fire lane is 25 foot wide. So
Okay.
it's pretty much industry standard across the board for those kind of spaces.
Well, to sum it up, if you parked your truck there, would you be comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I had.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Willis, I do have a question. On the ingress and egress, I do notice there's two lanes for an entrance and one to exit onto Nacogdoches Road. Do you anticipate, I guess you're all anticipating heavy traffic coming in?
Well, not heavy traffic, but we are the entrance off of FM 2252 is also a shared access for the neighboring lot. So we want to make sure it's sized appropriately
okay.
to accommodate their traffic as well.
I guess my concern was getting out onto Nacogdoches Loop, and you only have that dedicated, I guess it's going to be either you take a right or a left, and normally you see that center lane to allow for a left turn for that traffic, but I was just wondering if our city engineer looked at that. Nancy?
He looked at that during the master planning process,
Oh, okay.
and I believe it is going to be right turn out only
I
on
don't,
It's
Nacogdoches.
going to be right turn.
not at this time, but once it's expanded, it will be. It will be
Okay.
revised, yeah.
I do have one more question. What is the, on this phase one, Mr. Willis, the impervious cover for phase one?
I don't have those numbers on top of my head.
I'm assuming you're within the,
I know we're below
you're below.
the 33%, but I don't have those numbers on top of my head. They're probably on one of the charts on one of the drawing sheets.
Yeah, I try to, it's hard to read. That's why I asked. Thank you. I'm assuming if it wasn't, we'd be in a different position. All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I had an additional question, and Commissioner Jackman brought up something that made me look at the overhead projection a little more, and actually it's demonstrated on the schematic as well. That entrance, that ingress to the property is adjacent to, forgive me if I had the wrong word for this. It's a lagoon where you turn around, the cars turn around when they're doing the widening of the road, or TxDOT. What's that called? It's a loom?
Yes.
Loom. Yeah, okay. In relationship to the loom, I mean, I'm looking at it and saying it's right next to the loom.
We've met with TxDOT, and that the location that we have the driveway in currently is where TxDOT has instructed us to put the driveway.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so, again, this is a special use permit request for phase one. And I'm pretty sure that in all that you have submitted and that has been reviewed by the engineer and the city, that you have met all the regulations and requirements as stated in the ordinance.
Yes.
Okay. Having said that, do I, and apparently there's no more questions, so may I have a motion?
I make a motion, we make a recommendation to City Council to approve the variance for, the issuance of a special use permit for this property.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to recommend to City Council the issuance of a special use permit for Phase 1 for Pension Mark. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is ordinance number 210-11-2021, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garbridge, Texas, adopting board and commission policies and procedures, providing a cumulative and savings clause, and providing for severability and declaring an effective date. So tonight, we are going to interview some possible candidates for Planning and Zoning Commission Place 7 vacancy. Could I please have the two applicants? Would you raise your hand if you're, okay, both of you, all right. Could I please have Darren Bates? Good evening. Would you please just give us a brief summary, because we have your application in front of us, so could you just give us a brief summary of why you'd like to be on Planning and Zoning?
Yes, ma'am. Shall I speak about myself first, or, okay. I'll try to be brief. That's a relative term, so I can be long-winded. My name is Darren Bates. I've been a resident in Garbridge for almost 7 years now. I have a wife and 5 children who have attended all the Garbridge schools. I say Garbridge schools, Garbridge Elementary, the previous high school out there at Canyon Middle and the Canyon High, and in addition, the Danville Middle School and the Davenport High School. Currently have 3 in the grade schools and 2 college age attending a local community college here, and they're doing well. I thoroughly enjoy Garbridge. I enjoy the neighborhood that I live in at 20103 Regency Run. I am an active participant in our neighborhood as far as our homeowner association, listening to our neighbors, understanding what their desires and hopes are, and doing my best to, I guess, critique any things that are brought up, and standing up for my neighbors and also Garbridge. I appreciate Garbridge's way of life. And please let me know if I am going a little long. I just have a couple points here I'll target. I recently retired from the Air Force this past October after 22 years of service. I was predominantly an instructor pilot. Took pride in my service, and I also took pride in the safety and specialty of flying aircraft, doing it safely, methodically, precisely, in order to accomplish the mission well. I've enjoyed my career very much, and I'll be moving on to, as it looks like now, civil service here at Randolph, JBSA Randolph. I've been an active participant also at the Planning and Zoning Committee meetings, I'll say standing up for our neighborhood and the desires of our neighbors. There are 2 prominent ones that stand out. The first one was there was a zoning change that was looked at for the property perpendicular to Regency Run as it travels south to 2252. And that was about, I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And then of recent, I've did a little bit of research and background for the potential quick trip that was looking to go into what I'll call the gateway of Garbridge, and was able to represent the ordinances as the variances were looked at for those particular members who were looking to make that change. I enjoy getting into the details. I enjoy looking at the ordinances and also the intent of the city and its citizens, and working towards that way as best possible. There are 2 prominent positions that I've had in the Air Force that I'll say are board or committee related. One of the most previous ones was about 2 years ago as the Director of Inspections for the 12th Flying Training Wing. It encompassed not just JBSA Randolph, what we know as Randolph Field or Randolph Air Force Base, but also at the U.S. Air Force Academy. It was governed over there, and then Pensacola Naval Air Station. So I would travel with team members about 12 to 15, and we would go into those locations And we would inspect, deep dive into specialties, not only that I was familiar with, but also ones I wasn't familiar with. So as team lead, I would lead inspectors who were specialists in their particular areas, and we would inspect. Why I'm bringing this up is that we would deliberate and work through potential challenges on deficiencies that were found. And as lead, I would critique and challenge those at times, bringing in other inspectors too to kind of look at what's the Air Force instruction or Department of Defense instruction or U.S. code if it went that high, and said, okay, are we writing up a proper deficiency or not? So as I see that relates to potential challenges to variances or challenges to particular ordinances as variances are looking to be made. Couple of bragging points. Well, I'll just hit one. One that doesn't necessarily hit the headlines, but is near and dear to my heart, is I was, as lead, or director of inspections, lead on inspection, was able to make a change to the fitness policy for Joint Base San Antonio, which encompassed Fort Sam, Camp Bullis, Lackland Air Force Base, or JBSA Lackland, and JBSA Randolph, covering about 10,000 personnel. And what the crux of the issue was is that there were some folks in what I'll call back shops who were being led well by their supervisors, but their supervisors didn't know that they were entitled to a certain amount of fitness per day, per week, as the schedule allowed. So deep dived into it, was able to highlight that, was able to get policy letters posted throughout the 4 locations I mentioned across JBSA Randolph, and ensured that those folks, you know, from the top of the rung to the bottom rung, were being given the proper fitness standards that they deserved. I do like to deep dive into matters. I can be long-winded at times. I do like to think of myself as someone who, although I do have a perspective and opinion about something, listening to other people as best I can, and getting folks to work together well. I hope that was brief.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Bates? Okay, well,
You know I have questions. I just letting other people.
I know. I know.
Full disclosure, Mr. Bates is a neighbor of mine. I've known him for the 7 years he's been here. Excuse me. Mr. Bates is a neighbor of mine. I've known him for the 7 years, and I can attest to what he said. I didn't know how long it had been, but I guess it's 7 years. How do you feel about the controversial thing going before planning and zoning now and draft ordinances? At different times, there'll be different things. Right now, it's impervious cover, okay? We're debating and juggling that back and forth, impervious cover. The city manager has pointed out that when something comes to, a variance comes to her from the developers, over the years, probably 9 times out of 10, it's about something about impervious cover, and we want to have that adjusted one way or the other. We're debating it now in residential areas, and in the draft ordinance, we're going to increase it. But how do you feel about impervious cover? How important is impervious cover to you as a resident?
Excuse me. I don't think that that's appropriate to ask Mr. Bates about that right now. We just want to know his interest in planning and zoning, because that is an issue that's still on the table, and so I really don't think that's pertinent.
Well, then
or appropriate, actually.
Let me rephrase it then. What do you see as the future outlook for Garden Ridge and development? Is that appropriate?
Yes.
Okay.
It's general, yes.
Okay.
Well, the city motto is Garbridge is it's a way of life, not just a place to live. And when I moved to Garden Ridge, I was particularly attracted to Garden Ridge, actually from a 7th generation Texan who said, you know, Darren, knowing your family and knowing the kind of person that you are, I think that Garden Ridge, he called it a bedroom community, is a place that you would enjoy living. I just saw Garden Ridge on the map at that time. Getting out here to Garden Ridge, and I think I practically drove every street that was in Garden Ridge. At least I tried to. And not only drove Garden Ridge every street, but also tried to get in here at 5 a.m., at 5 p.m., and then also at 11 o'clock. You know, what is Garden Ridge like and what's going on? I think that from my perspective and what I understand in talking with folks in our neighborhood, and also from folks who have children in the schools, is that they more or less feel, you know, the same way, and that they desire to have a Garden Ridge, that bedroom type, family type, I'll describe, peaceful, natural-like looking city. So where do I see Garden Ridge going in the future? I think that's I won't step so much far in that direction. I want to, now at this point, I see myself more or less in the role of looking at the city ordinances and looking at different folks who present cases, you know, to have variances with those ordinances and say, okay, what is the intent of what was written, and are they being abided by, and is this being properly changed depending on upon what folks and citizens of our city see and what's best.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other, yes, oh, you had, okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you very much for your service, and
Thanks, sir.
congratulations on your retirement. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
it feels good. I definitely appreciate your the way you broke down. You definitely talked a lot about critique and expect and your inspections and working together and through fact finding. There's important with scientific method or anything is you also got to realize when you're wrong. Were you ever proven wrong?
Absolutely. Many times, and probably more times I'd like to admit. I do try to, in anything that I express, know that there is some degree of ignorance to what I'm bringing forward or to the topic that I'm discussing. And I'm going to say that the Air Force more or less taught me that, because every day that I flew, whether, you know, I was an instructor, whether I was aircraft commander or whether I was a student, I was learning something, and there was always something getting back on the ground, if not one thing, multiple things of something I learned today, and what's a takeaway from this. And I'd like to say that in my daily life, that's something that I learn from, and I try to convey that to my children too.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anyone else have questions or comments for Mr. Bates?
Yes, Mr. Bates, again, thank you for your service, and
Thanks, sir.
congratulations on your upcoming retirement. I know we've seen you here at Planning and Zoning to speak, and are you familiar with the master land use plan that the city has put together back in that's some, you know, the vision of the city?
I have a general sense. I don't have it, I'll say, memorized.
Okay.
But I do have a general sense of what it is and where it's located. So, and I do believe I can read it well.
Yeah, there's a lot in there that gives what the city, you know, there's a lot of data in there and information on the direction for the future growth of the city. So I just wanted to see how familiar you've been with that master land use plan.
I can't speak in detail on it right now.
That's fine.
So,
It's
yes, sir.
it's a lot to take in, but it's something that we use in reference to what we look at in future developments. And
I do know that what's prominent in my mind is the development that's looking to take place along 2252, the input of sewer lines and such, and what that would mean for an increase in business.
very good.
Sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Mr. Bates, you said you've either attended or have seen meetings from Planning and Zoning.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you also attended any city council meetings? Because that's important too. What happens is we're a recommending body, and sometimes we don't get it right.
Yes,
But then it goes, the good thing is we're only here to do the initial research and present our findings, hopefully factual, to City Council for their approval or denial. But I think watching planning and zoning is only half the story. It really culminates with what happens at City Council. Have you ever attended a City Council meeting?
Yes, ma'am, I have. Of recent, the Quick Trip, where that was being presented to the City Council, and then also what the Planning and Zoning Committee brought to that meeting I was able to witness. I'll say I was an active participant in that, forwarding documents up to the city. I believe Kat was the one that I worked with directly. I'll say a comprehensive plan that a comprehensive research that I put together was almost 4 or 5 pages worth, to include pictures that I took visiting different sites, and also a PowerPoint presentation that didn't make it, only because it wasn't permitted.
Okay.
But yes, ma'am, I am familiar with the City Council meeting, have attended, and have viewed it also online via our city's website.
Okay. Have you read Ordinance 13?
I have not read Ordinance 13.
Okay, that's the current ordinance that we are following right now. We do have a draft ordinance in process, but anything that comes before Planning and Zoning and City Council right now has to follow ordinance, the original Ordinance 13. So that's very good information.
Yes, ma'am.
Especially if you make it to the dais, you need to know what that ordinance is all about. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. You have my word that if I was chosen to be an active volunteer or an active member on the commission, that I would be intimately familiar with Ordinance 13, among others.
Okay, last chance. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Commission.
Now if we could have Mr. Maloney come up. Same thing for you. Would you mind telling the commission what it is about planning and zoning that really is near and dear to your heart, and why you would want to be part of this commission?
Okay, thank you. Again, my name is Joe Maloney, and like my colleague, I'd like to spend a few minutes in summary about some demographics about myself. My wife and I, Dee, moved to Garbridge about 22 years ago this September. We live on Hickory Bend Drive, actually across from the consideration of where that new building is going to go in. We have 2 children. My son Brian and his family reside in Atlanta, and my daughter is up near Austin. In regards to why I would, I also, like my colleague, spent 20 years in the Air Force, 10 of it enlisted, 10 of it as an officer in the communications field. As to why I would like to be on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I believe it was some 2 months ago now that the commission, this commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, held a meeting to decide that Quick Trip gas station there at the corner of 3009 and 2252. And I just got inspired by the mayor. He did an eloquent job, I thought, of taking the issue of describing how in using the master plan to look at the 3 ordinances that were described by Quick Trip that they wanted held in abeyance, or the word I'm looking for is they wanted a variance to it. Thank you. So in any event, the mayor took each one of those, the one that was, I think, the impervious cover, the fuel tank issue, and then the signs. And the way he went about it was, he said that if we allowed the Quick Trip gas station to have variances to those 3 ordinances, then we'd be setting a precedent for all future companies that wanted to come in And they in turn would have the right then, by the adjustment of those ordinances, to be able to put up impervious covers that were greater than 35%, I believe it's 35% of what the building site is. They would be able to put in perhaps a fuel tank that was closer than 180, or was it 1,800? I forget the distance. I think it may have been 1,800 feet from our water, the existing water tank. And then in terms of the signs, I think the issue there had to deal with, we are a small community. We want to remain a small community, and we don't want to look like Shirts where we've got these billboards up everywhere. And so I think it was because of those three ordinances that are in part support the master plan, that I took a real interest in what it is that you all do. And so for that reason, it became very apparent to me that I would like to help set precedent, and as this commission does. So that's pretty much my reasoning.
Commissioners, any comments or questions for Mr. Maloney?
Yes, thank you for your service.
You're welcome, Mike.
Now, we talked earlier, but you are retired now?
I retired quite some time ago, not just recently like my colleague.
Right.
Congratulations, by the way.
How many hours, I know you're on a few different committees, how many hours a week do you think you spend volunteering for the city of Garbridge?
Do I currently spend?
Or a month?
Well, I go on patrol because I'm part of the Citizens Police Academy. I patrol once a week, so that's 4 times a month, and that's 2 hours on a shift where we patrol the various subdivisions, and just looking for things out of the ordinary that we could report back to the police department should we see them. So that's what, 8 hours times 4 weeks, about 32 hours right now with the Citizens Police Academy.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else, commissioners? Okay, same thing. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was too slow with the button. I'd ask you the same question I asked Mr. Bates in terms of what's your vision for the future of Garden Ridge?
So I told you, Mr. Miller, Dr. Miller, that we've lived here coming up on 22 years. And during the course of that time, I've seen a number of changes. Specifically, Bracken Village was not there, sir, when we moved here. And I don't know I mean, while it's a very quaint little community, going down 2252, I don't foresee that maybe being there, that much too distance in the future. I think that'll eventually change. I think it probably has to. But in terms of Garden Ridge proper, the actions that you all work on, for instance, approving just tonight a recommendation to go to the city council so that that building can potentially move forward, because listening to you all and your questions to the gentleman that's proposing that building, it appears to me that he's met all the city's ordinances, and it appears to me that looking at a description of or a picture of that building, it's going to look very much like the other fine buildings that we have here in Garden Ridge, as far as Jim Voeller's office up on the corner, the lawyer's office, across the street, the dental facility, and then Pension Mark, or however that's pronounced, those buildings. So I would like to be a part of a group such as yourselves that sees this city moving forward and approving facilities of that nature, of that quality, so that we keep the caliber and the level of construction that's going to be done in this town to that type of construction. And I just think that, that you're doing a great job, in my view, of what's being approved to this point.
Okay, my turn.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you, sir, read the master land use plan?
No, I have not. The master land use plan. I'll say no, I have not.
Okay.
But
It's
I-
interesting reading, let me tell you that, because
Okay.
it set up the vision for what hopefully we will move forward with in Garden Ridge. It's got a footprint in parts of it, but, and while it's not etched in stone, it does kind of keep us a little focused on where we should probably be headed. And that's fine, but that's something you would need to make sure you read. The other one, and probably more important at this very minute, is Ordinance 13, just like I asked Mr. Bates. Have you, do you know, or have you read Ordinance 13?
No, I have not. I do believe that that is involving the impervious cover.
That it is the whole ordinance for, that pertains to planning and zoning.
Oh, okay.
And like I told Mr. Bates, Ordinance 13, that's currently, I think the last draft was in 2018, is what is being used right now for what we just did a little while ago for pension mark, and also for any future development that might come along. We are in the process of revising that ordinance, and it's in draft, but until that draft is approved by City Council, we are using Ordinance 13. That's imperative,
Okay.
that a commissioner have read that and know what's in it.
Well, it's interesting, if I could interrupt for just a second. You know, in trying to prepare for an interview for such as this, I did go to the website and look up the Planning and Zoning Committee and essentially, you know, what the goals and so forth are, but there's very limited information. So it's hard to, it was hard to try to prepare for, you know, this particular interview. I will say, though, Karen, that back in 2017, in the building just adjacent to this one, I did attend the master planning meeting whereby you all, or many of you sat together, and as far as what was incorporated and unincorporated, if you're talking about that particular master plan of what areas are to be incorporated versus those that are not, I haven't seen it since 2017, but I know that particular part of the master plan because that was a very long, process in getting the master plan to fruition.
Yes, and all of this information is actually on the website, on the Garden Ridge
Oh,
website. Yes, so sometimes you have to do a little digging, but it's there. And especially, you can go under ordinances, click on that, there's a list will come up, and Ordinance 13 really pertains to planning and zoning.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that information.
Sure. Okay, if there's nothing else for Mr. Maloney? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Would you mind turning off the mic?
Testing 1, 2.
There you go. Thank you. So for both your benefits, I wanted to also state that whoever ends up getting on planning and zoning, it will be imperative that you take the information that is typically put in your box over a week in advance and also sent to you via email by City Secretary Marissa, that you read and you study the agenda and the attached information or the information that goes along with the agenda. You cannot be a functioning member if you don't know what we're talking about on during our meeting. And so that's a big part of this. It takes work, okay? You will spend, depending on the topic, you will spend a number of hours researching and sometimes driving around the city or checking things out so that in your own mind, you know what the agenda item is all about and, you know, how we're going to discuss it. But it's also imperative that you attend as many meetings as you can, because if you're not in attendance, it could come down to, and if all of us took that type of attitude, we might not have a quorum. That means we could not have a meeting. So it's very important that you attend the meetings and that you are totally prepared. Did I forget anything, Commission? No? Okay, thank you both very much. At this time, the Commission can discuss and make a possible recommendation to City Council. Going once?
Everybody's looking at me. I got to prime the pump again?
I guess. Well, I can't because Tia has.
Yeah. They're both fine applicants. The addresses, one of the discriminators I use, I'll pull this to me rather than me what's called. One of the discriminators I like to use when we have applicants is where they live in the city, although it shouldn't be. The development is along 2252 and 3009, and I like to think that people adjacent to that area would have a little bit more interest in the rest of the city because it's going up across the street from them. That hasn't necessarily been the case in the past, and tonight that discriminator was eliminated because both applicants live in relative proximity to the area. I'm honored to have both of them. Both have fine backgrounds. I'm prejudiced to a certain extent because, again, Mr. Bates is my neighbor. I've known him for 7 years. And along those lines, I guess I'd have to make a motion that we recommend Mr. Bates to City Council and to fill the vacant position and go from there.
Do we want to have a little more discussion? Does anyone, before we do a motion, if anyone else would like to make a comment before we get to moving the motion?
Yeah, I know I'm new, but I think that both are highly qualified and both bring great qualities to the commission. Mr. Bates and his research ability, you know, looking at things, which is awesome, which we do need, but, you know, at the same token, this is a volunteerism, and you cannot put aside what is literally built, the foundation of the city is volunteerism. If you really think about it, and that's actually a big thing for me, is getting out in the community, volunteering, not just for one thing, but for multiple things, because it shows commitment to the community and being part of the community too.
I just wanted to add, for both of you, it's a difficult decision to make when we've got two people going for one position, because, like has been mentioned, you are both very qualified, so we unfortunately have to make a decision on one of you. So I just want you both to know that no matter what happens, please don't hesitate to apply to any other commission or to help in any other way. You're both very, you both would be a great asset to the city in anything you did. Thank you for applying.
I too have want to say thank you for both of y'all's applications, and y'all both, Mr. Bates and Mr. Maloney, both bring good qualities, and difficult decision, and like Mr. Commissioner Hill mentioned, there's always other opportunities if you don't get selected tonight to volunteer in other capacities in the city. There's always vacancies out there on the Water Commission or other commissions that the city has.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. It is, and that's always been a very tough situation for the commission, but that's the way it's done. Okay, so any further comments? Okay. You made a motion, is that correct?
Would you like me to repeat?
Please.
I make a motion that we recommend Mr. Bates to City Council to fill place 7 on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay.
Okay. So we have four recommending to City Council Mr. Darren Bates to place, what was it? 7? 7. Yes, place 7. And we had one no vote. So the motion passes. And Mr. Bates, your name will be forwarded to City Council for the April meeting. I suggest you attend that meeting because they may have questions for you. Thank you so much. And thank you both for your interest. Thank you. Thank you. It is always tough when we have to choose one person over several candidates, and as the gentleman was trying to say, it didn't seem quite kosher to do it with 2 candidates sitting there, but we understand how he felt. So moving on to the next item is the draft zoning ordinance. And we will hold a public hearing at 6:57 p.m. So anyone wanting to come up and make comments about the draft zoning ordinance that was, that you were able to see on the website, and if you have any comments regarding any of the changes or things that were not being changed, please state your name, your address, and then afterwards sign that sheet. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Nadine Knaus, and I live at 20592 Tiber Rose. I was chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission for 11 years, served on the City Council for 4, and was mayor for actually 2.5. As a Type A general law city, Garbridge is limited on the types of activities and behaviors that can control through its ordinances. The city's primary responsibilities to its citizens are to enact ordinances that protect public health and safety, ensure the orderly development of the city. While I commend the commission and the staff on their work, I find that some aspects of the proposed ordinance extend the city's control over the use of private property far beyond that of public health and safety, infringes on private property use, and in some cases actively devalues existing property values. Motorhomes are not like other RVs in terms of cost, weight, etc., and should be treated differently. The ability to park a motorhome at one's home is actually increasing the value of the property. We made almost $60,000 in upgrades to our drive and electric system to accommodate our motorhome. The proposed ordinance could result in a taking of making our motorhome pad unusable to ourselves and future homeowners. Requiring motorhomes to be parked behind solid fences will make our property unsightly and make it easier for vandals and thieves to do their work behind fences outside the view of our police department. Removing certain allowable uses in side and rear setbacks will significantly limit the usable parts of people's properties and will not be enforceable. The city should not pass ordinances that it cannot or will not enforce. We specifically moved to non-HOA areas of Garbridge that we did not have excessive oversight of changes to and uses of our property. Garbridge already has extensive building permits requirements to protect property values. We really don't need more regulation. The proposed ordinance does not address existing public health and safety issue violations such as garbage cans, wood piles, and items stacked in yards and driveways that attract vermin. These are clearly health and safety concerns and detract from property values. Finally, increasing the allowable impervious cover limits by 43% in residential districts will not only change the basic nature and character of the city, but could result and will result in increasing runoff and possible increased localized flooding as our city and drainage structures are planned assuming a much lower impervious cover requirement. There may also be impacts on existing older septic systems. I'm against this change without a citywide engineering study of its impact. And again, I want to thank the commission and the staff and all the people who have worked on this. Having been in your seats, 13 is probably the hardest ordinance to get your hands around, and you're going to make some people happy and some people very unhappy. But again, I want to thank you very, very much for all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Robert Balch. My wife and I own the house at 2592 Timber Rose. For the last week, I've been trying to understand the changes I may need to make because of this draft. More specifically, I'm very concerned about when those changes need to be made. We own a very large motorhome and have gone to great expense. Nadine just said $60,000. We looked it up quick yesterday. In addition to making our property immediately less functional, it's going to detract from the look of the house. Putting a 12.5-foot tall motorhome, this is a luxury motorhome, behind a 6-foot wood fence, just looks like something on the south side. I hate to say it that way. It's just plain ugly. At first glance, there appears to be some attempt to grandfather non-conforming uses with regards to parking RVs and boats. However, the more I read this, the more contradictory that statement seems to appear. Section 2.07.09 inserts the word legal, as in currently non-conforming uses that are legal can be continued. What if you're not legal? And where's this word come from? Why is it in there? Did the commission include legal to stop things like selling drugs? I don't think so. I think they're trying to make a reference to the current 13. And current 13 is written bad. That's why you're rewriting it. There's a lot of errors in there about paragraph references. There's some vague terms like screening. And even the definition of side yard, I would take objection to. So I don't know if we're going to be grandfathered or not. I've talked to 4 RV owners out of 4. Only one has an idea they probably grandfather. Most don't understand these terms. And the people I've talked to cannot read these 2 chapters, these 2 sections. I think even worse, the term legal is combined with another ambiguous phrase, at the time of passage of this ordinance. When combined, you must be legal at the time of passage. Well, what if changes are needed? We don't know we need those changes. We're not grandfathered. So I think there's a lot of people that I've talked to in the city that think we're being grandfathered. I read it. I'm not guaranteed that we're grandfathered. Therefore, the other issue is about this passage of time. It says, legal at the time of passage of this ordinance. What if I'm out of town the week, the month that you pass the ordinance? I'm not using the property. I think it should be clarified. I think before this proposal gets any further, this idea about grandfathering needs to be clarified, or at least what is and what isn't. Ideally, somebody would be able to come out, look at my property, and say, this is good, or we need to do that before it's passed, or we can do that within a year after it's passed, or give me some guidance. Like I said, I've got a lot of money into this parking my RV, and I can't understand what it's saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Bill Pohl. I live at 21016 Hickory Bend. The draft zoning ordinance proposes changing the maximum impervious cover percentage on residential properties to 50% from the current 35%. In reviewing the available documents, I can't see why this change has occurred, nor why is it justified. Unless P&Z can satisfactorily justify the reason for this change, I recommend that the current 35% figure be used. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So, Jim Bowler, 8223 Wildwood Park. I brought some case law along here as far as what's happened when other cities have put ordinances in place that say you can restrict short-term rentals. I so much appreciate what Robert just said and our former mayor, because what you're doing is you're changing something. You're taking people's property rights. They purchased their property, and now you want to change the rules, and you don't have a good reason for it. My point in doing this is there are people in the city who are already ready to file a lawsuit if the city passes this ordinance on restricting short-term ordinances or short-term rentals. I'm wondering if there's been a lot of complaints because of VRBOs or Airbnbs. I doubt it. I mean, if I rented out my property, it would rent for $1,200 a night, $1,500 a night. It's not going to be people who are vagrants. They're people that are party animals. They're going to be people who just want to come to San Antonio and experience some of the things that we have. You can't take a property right from somebody without due process. That's what our Constitution guarantees. And what this ordinance does, it does that. It takes away my property right if I wanted to do that. And so I want you to reconsider this, because if you pass this ordinance restricting short-term rentals, there will be a lawsuit. I promise you there will be. Why? This is the case law. I have 7 copies of the different city ordinances that have been passed and then failed. And it's not worth it. Why go through the expense of fighting the legal battle that there would be if you pass this ordinance restricting short-term rental, restricting things like the previous speakers have talked about. It's just, before you take somebody's property, you have to have due process. So I'm hoping that you don't pass this on to City Council without further consideration. So I'll give these to Nancy.
Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Matt Ellis. I live at 9426 Goldenrod. I'm not anywhere near as prepared, but I want to say that lady right there, I think, had it down. I agree with her and pretty much everything she said. I wanted to point out, though, 4 years ago, my wife and I decided to buy a house here in Garbridge because we could park my boat there. I don't park my boat there, but if I wanted to, I ought to have that freedom, and I don't want that freedom taken from me. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Now, if I parked my boat in the backyard, I would have to pour a slab and have a little driveway, and I would violate the impervious cover law or ordinance. And I don't see any way out of it other than to just not change it. I don't think there's any reason to change it, and I don't want that freedom taken from me. So I think we should say no to it. Thank you.
Say no to what? The changes in?
Changing of the ordinance, yeah. There's
All-
no reason to change it. Well, why?
Oh, of the current 13.
Right.
Anyone else?
Evening. He inspired me to go up because I didn't prepare as our mayor did. This is my first city council meeting. My name is Sarah Ann Custer. I'm probably one of your newest residents. I am also a recent retiree after 27 years in the Air Force. I've been to 17 countries and I have lived in a bunch of states. And when I came down here, TDY, a friend of mine gave me a realtor. And when I drove into Garden Ridge, I knew I was home. I cannot tell you that feeling, not having had a home for most of my life. This was home when I got to Garden Ridge, because you had space. Your houses weren't the McMansions up to the edge. You had deer running around. I've seen fox on our property. Oh, and I live at 21307 Hampton Park Yeah, I'm still learning my address. And the setback, I'm concerned about that changing. I'm concerned about the impervious structure changing. What is lovely about this city is there is open space. And I wish I had taken time, as the previous mayor did, and have written my comments out. But for coming up meetings, I will write them out and be more prepared. But you've done a great job with this city, and don't go trying to change it. Just please don't change it too much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening. I'm Jerry Baruki, and I live at 20806 Woodland Cove. I had not planned to say anything tonight, but after listening to some folks, I thought I would just like to give my opinion. And having just met with a number of folks in the Forest Waters subdivision, especially in our cul-de-sac and area, there was a fairly strong consensus that when you enter a neighborhood and there are boats and trucks and RVs and stuff parked all over the place, it detracts from the beauty of the trees and the landscaping and the careful buildings of the home. It takes away from that. My wife and I love to just walk through the community, which is one of the basic advantages of living in Garden Ridge. You can walk from the very streets, and people do, and it's such a wonderfully collegial neighborhood. But most of the folks that we interact with are not in favor of opening that door to give more and more free access to people to bring in their equipment, boats, motor homes, and what will be next, large trucks, so I would like to register a negative about the idea of parking these vehicles or making it easier for these to be more easily sighted. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So I already spoke earlier about I have some time left. Can I just say one more thing?
No, I don't think so.
Seriously? Okay.
Nancy, am I wrong? Okay. Sorry.
Can I have this time?
No, we don't share time. So sorry. Anyone else? If not, then I close the, oh, did you have comments? I'm sorry. Marissa has some written comments to read.
I have one written comment. It is from Martha Stipp at 21007 Cedar Branch. I have read the changes to the proposed Ordinance 13. I noticed the Commission changed the maximum impervious coverage in residential areas from 35 to 50% last month. I would like to know why the Commission made this sudden change. It seems to be a knee-jerk decision by the Commission that was not well thought out as a result of one resident's desire to build out to 54% of his lot. Keep in mind that only one person has come before you seeking a variance in residential areas asking for more impervious cover. That should tell you that the vast majority of homeowners are fine with the 35% maximum that has been in place for decades. The 35% impervious cover limit is what defines the character and aesthetic appeal of our homes. Our large tree-filled lots with open space are what makes Garden Ridge the unique community where people want to live. Think of neighborhoods like Chavano Park, Hill Country Village, and Almas Park. Garden Ridge is similar to these communities. All have large tree-filled lots. We are also like these unique communities in that all are the top places to live in the San Antonio, New Braunfels metro area. Garden Ridge's estate-like homes command a higher price per square foot because of our uniqueness. By changing the impervious cover limit from 35 to 50, you are opening the door to increased building. It was noted at the last commission meeting that most residential building is complete. While that is true, you are forgetting that existing homes will be able to build an additional 15% on their property. Think about this for a minute. Say you have a 2-acre lot in Garden Ridge. Your new impervious limit would allow a homeowner to fill an entire acre with a house, shop, outdoor kitchen, pool, even a tennis court. What if you had a 2-acre lot? Do you see how this would change the character of the city? You're risking the very thing that entices people to pay more to live here. I have a 3/4 acre lot. We have a greenhouse and a large 2-car garage in our backyard. We are close to the 35% limit. No pool can be built on our property due to the decisions we made. That's fine. That was our choice. When we sell, I will inform prospective buyers of the 35% limit. If they want a pool, then my house is not for them. I feel that we cannot build out to 50%. I love sitting in my yard, my large wooded backyard. It feels like sitting in a small park. That rural open feeling is what makes our lots so desirable. There is an even more important issue when the impervious cover limit is increased by 15%. It is water runoff. Right now, there are homes that have to deal with runoff on their properties where neighbors are far from 35% impervious cover of their lots. Have you noticed the bar ditches in areas like in Garbridge Estates? They are there for a reason. We have tremendous water runoff after heavy rain. If my neighbor decided to cover more of his lot up to 50%, my home would be at risk and I am not in a flood zone. There are many homes at risk. Some homes are in a flood zone. My home is not unique. Here is a fact for you to consider. Land in its natural state has only a 10% runoff rate. Medium density development of 30% has a runoff rate of 30%. Going up to 50% will increase the runoff rate even more. I hope the Commission will rethink the decision of increasing the impervious cover from 35 to 50%. It simply is not in the best interest of the city. It may also cause serious drainage issues for some homeowners in the future.
Thank you, Marissa. At 7:15, I am closing the public hearing. Now, we move to discuss and make possible recommendations. The council needs to discuss.
Well, oh, I'm sorry.
Before we move on to the possible, we're under the old Ordinance 13, and I guess we missed this. I certainly missed it. I spent a great deal of time reading the new ordinance that is in draft. But it says, a motion to improve any matter before the commission or to recommend approval of any request requiring city council action shall require 4 yes votes from members present. Now, it goes on to say other things, but after reading this, and I just found out about this, we shouldn't be discussing this. This should have never gone forward.
What should not have gone forward?
The two things that were voted on at the last one, the 35 to 50 and the parking.
Okay, so the question is, though, whether or not what occurred at the last planning and zoning meeting could be considered a vote, even though it was consensus-driven.
It's got to be 4. It was 3.
Could our lawyer weigh in on that, please?
Okay, there you go. I was at the last meeting, but was there was there a quorum? Were all the members present at the last meeting? So if it's by a majority vote, so it's the majority of the members present. So whatever the majority was.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So we had a quorum for the meeting.
Yes.
We had only 3 members who could vote because I could not weigh in. So 3 out of what we now have is a full contingent, or almost full.
But it's whatever it was that last time.
The last time it was 3 members who could vote.
Okay. And how many members were present? 5?
4.
4. Okay, so 3 passed, so that's a majority. I mean, is the members present? That would. of the, did it say the members present or the elected, total elected members?
No motion for approval shall continue under this rule until the commission's next regular meeting. And it says, requires 4 yes votes from members present. Any motion recommended approval that fails to carry 4 yes votes when all commission members are not present at the time of voting shall be carried to the next regular meeting upon a motion carried by the majority of those present.
So I believe that Commissioner Leatherberry is, what he's stating is that, was it a valid, even consensus vote to put forth a change?
So were those changes incorporated into the ordinance that you're going to be proposing tonight? I guess that's my question.
Yes.
Okay. So if then those are recommended changes, so you're looking at the ordinances in totality, which include those changes. If, let's say, there were not a totality of 4 votes of the members present, those are in the ordinance now. So you could approve it to go in front of council, unless you want to take those, unless you want to take those out. But what I'm saying is that is there's not going to be much difference in a sense if there's a couple of provisions that did not have that 4th vote. Currently,
There could not be 4 votes because there were not 4 voting members present. That's
Okay.
his point. I guess I'm not understanding.
well, but I guess I'm trying to, right now, it's new meeting. You have a new item. The ordinance in front of you has all the provisions. You could either pass it or not and reconsider those other 2. But right now, in the totality as it is, you could pass it and move it to the council.
Would it not be appropriate to discuss it now? The fact that we are trying to decide whether or not there was enough people, I know that there's been a reconsideration by several people. I did some research over the past month, as well as the letter that you received from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and the research that you did. And I think it would be very easy just to undo what we did, or at least revisit that very quickly. And then what you're bringing up as far as the 4 votes would...
The ordinance is in front of the board right now. You could talk about anything in the ordinance this evening, and then make a decision to pass it to the council for recommendation.
Sometimes we don't get things right, and I think those 2 may have been one of those instances when we did not get things right. And we ought to fix it before we move forward.
In this particular circumstance, you could certainly talk about it and then make the decision to pass the whole ordinance to the council for consideration.
Excuse me, I'm actually new. Today's my first day, so I wasn't on. I just went through the Open Meetings Act, all that training, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not sure if I understood it correctly. If the committee is 7 members, whether it's filled or not, a quorum takes at least 4 of those 7. Is that correct?
It's the majority. It depends on the item in a sense, but for a quorum and for passing, there's kind of 2 different things.
Okay. Yeah. That was the only question.
Sure.
Don't we only need to have a consensus? We don't even need to really have a motion.
Yeah.
So in order to even have a meeting, we had to have 4 members present, which we did. Okay, so that was the quorum, passing the quorum test. Beyond that, I was here, I cannot vote. So that's what left us with actually 3 voting members. And I believe I understand what you're saying is we can look at anything on the latest changes to the draft if we so choose. And make comments or possible adjustments. The thing of it is, if we make more than likely more than even one adjustment, we would have to have another public hearing. Is that correct? No? We would pass it on with our corrections to City Council, and they would have a public hearing.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay. Interesting.
So I made the motion last month. And
I just
don't
want to
even
state
think it
for
was
the
a
record,
motion.
it was not a motion
Right,
last
it was a
month.
consensus.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
just
I
want
was
to
gonna
make sure we
say.
get that right. Thank
The
you.
motion and/or consensus, thank you. So I propose to seek a consensus on keeping the impervious cover for residential areas at 35% and foregoing what we talked about, or what was even discussed last month by raising it to 50. I have done my research, and I, like I mentioned just a few moments ago, got some very great information from what you did as well. And so I would seek consensus to leave it at 35%. Thank you.
So do we take this one at a time? I mean, if there's anything else, and, okay, my concern is, having heard from several members of the community, impervious cover was a big one, and we can very well take that off the table, but there are other comments that I don't know if we want to discuss, or if maybe there's an opportunity for the technical committee to weigh in on this before we send it to City Council. I don't know if we can do that. Because there are several things that, we may want to deliberate.
The items before the commission, you can do anything you want.
We work, having been involved with this draft ordinance, I believe, Nancy, it'll be 4 years in June. Yeah, 4 years. We've had technical committees, we've had strategic committees, and everything else. And we hear from the citizens tonight. This is the first public hearing we've had, actually. Well, this second public hearing we've had. And every time we have one, people will bring up their objections or affirmations of what we did. And I think it's going to be like that going forward, one way or the other. We anticipate that. Things talked about tonight, the motorhomes, the short-term rentals, and impervious cover, believe it or not, those things were discussed at our very first meeting in terms of looking at the draft ordinance. Because, we knew they were going to be hot ticket items. And we couldn't come up with a consensus, and we had to do the best we could with the information we had. And I think it's going to be a moving target going forward, one way or the other. And all of them are, we don't want to have amendments going forward every year. We'd like to try to get it right the first time. But these items, I don't know if they're solvable to everybody's satisfaction. Hearing tonight, maybe we do need to clarify some terminology in terms of grandfathering and things like that. Although to me it was straightforward. Apparently, it's not straightforward to everybody. The impervious cover, I'm an outlier on impervious cover. I think it should be considered on a case-by-case basis, especially in residential areas. And that may not necessarily be the way that the commission wants to go, or the city. And in that case, I'm an outlier, and I'm outvoted, and I have no problem with that. The short-term rentals, I don't have a dog in that fight, and we didn't think it was that big of a issue here in the city when we discussed it. It was something we went over. It was discussed, but it wasn't something we deliberated for a long period of time about. I sum it up by saying, no matter what we do, somebody's not going to be pleased. And I've changed my mind back and forth several times because the citizens will make good points I didn't think about, and that's what the commission tries to do. I hear different things from different commissioners. I say, that's right. I don't draw a line in the sand about everything. I try to listen and learn as I'm considering what the person's saying. And I too tonight heard some things and said, okay, impervious cover. I still feel it should be case by case, but I can lean the other way just as easy. But I think the citizens need to know that these things have been considered before, and we didn't just, take a dartboard and throw a dart at them and say, oh, let's change this, oh, let's change that. They gave some consideration to everything, and you can look at it either way.
Would someone else like to weigh in?
Thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with the impervious cover change back to the 35%. There's a lot of factors that go into that. Specifically, the city is the drainage in the city is basically most of it's bar ditches, and increasing that impervious cover will definitely speed up that water, cause other issues in the city on drainage, and causing other infrastructure that the city will then have to deal with down the line. And also on what Mr. Commissioner Leatherberry, I appreciate you doing your research from the TCEQ regarding this, the septic tanks. Very informative, and that's another big point to touch on there for the impervious cover, to keep it at the 35. I did want to mention or touch on the storage of use of vehicles and equipment in the residential zoning. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this, that the where you could park that the RV trailer boats, it would be on that rear interior side of the yard. Basically, that's really where your driveway is leading up to, and it's basically on the driveway side where your garage is. That's where we're calling the interior.
Well, it's not a corner lot.
When it's not a corner lot.
It's, if I'm correct, that's correct, Nancy. It's not a corner lot. The interior would be homes that are properties. Right.
Right. So I'm good with the way it's being proposed.
I would like to comment, because I absolutely, I'm on board with everybody about 35%. Absolutely, I've done my own research. And actually, believe it or not, TCEQ or TECQ actually has a 451-page manual on complying with Edwards Aquifer on ways that you can reduce your watershed. That's really what it's all about. That can actually help eliminate some of the impervious cover down to more than 35% based off the water collection points and everything else. I think 35% is absolutely awesome. Just have to, for future, potentially come up with ways and understand, and so we can share. And literally, how can we share that information with the public? I'm a big proponent of sharing information, and if there's any way we can get together or do our own research, say, hey, these things can really help eliminate, and then be able to put that, have that for public access, so residents can draw it up and help reduce if they stay within compliance. I think that's just a better service that we can provide for them outside of just saying yay or nay, and make it more opening, which I'm sure is meets the mayor and city council's vision for the city.
There's the item with regard to short-term rentals. I would like, since we had a lawyer present his thoughts on that, for our city attorney to weigh in on the fact that when it was put in the draft ordinance, it wasn't prohibited in the entire city. It was essentially relegated as a commercial use into the more commercial future districts. And so that's why it's not, right now, it's not allowed in residential. So could you just share some thoughts on what the citizen spoke about?
Now, let me get this other one that works. Testing? Okay. There was a case in front of the Texas Supreme Court, Draper versus City of Arlington, and the court found for the homeowner. No, I'm sorry. The homeowner appealed, but the court found for the city, in other words. So the city won, and the Supreme Court did not take the case up because it involved issues that were not related to a takings issue, is what the counselor said in front of the board. It's a takings issue apparently has not been resolved by the Texas Supreme Court. There's the other issues involved more of a procedural issue, but not necessarily the constitutional taking issue. So with regard to, is there an answer? There is not yet. Different courts of appeals have conflicting decisions which the Texas Supreme Court has to decide upon. So it's getting there, but it's not there yet.
Well, and I do know that that was a topic of considerable discussion, and the reason that we are suggesting to allow it in the city is because it is a right, but because it is a commercial use, with the advice of council, we allowed it in the future commercial areas. So I just kind of wanted to know where our standing was at this point.
The Texas Supreme Court, just at the end of January, denied petition, which means that they just didn't want to hear it. And for whatever reason, but then, so in a sense, the city was triumphant, the city won. But has that ultimate issue been decided by the Supreme Court? No. But again, the Court of Appeals did find for the city.
So the need for clarification of grandfathering. Nancy, how can residents, because there was a comment about, well, we don't even know if we're grandfathered and things, and for how long they've had, say, a motorhome parked very visible from their lot. How would a citizen find out whether or not they were grandfathered?
I believe the intent was that people that have invested in parking areas for their RVs would be grandfathered. We would go back into the building permits and determine that. That was what I recall being the intent behind the grandfathering of recreational vehicles.
So somebody could easily find out if they check their permits that they came and requested as to the date that was issued. Oh, and if they don't have a permit, then they're not grandfathered. Correct.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I'm kind of like with the individual that spoke, that said, Yes, we moved into Garden Ridge for a certain ambiance in the city. The trees, the deer, the open spaces. But and while you may have invested certain amount of money in your RV and maybe in a pad to park it on, maybe your neighbors are not as thrilled with that as you might think. And you can ask them, but they're not going to tell you the truth. But with the way the homes in Garden Ridge right now, the selling prices of homes in Garden Ridge, just like everywhere else in the state, are quite high. And I do not believe that and we're not talking about just temporarily having a motor home or an RV or a boat or whatever for what's allowed currently in the ordinance for 10 days, 4 times a year. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about storing commercial vehicles, RVs, boats, and the list goes on. Because I don't think that having those parked in the residential area is really going to improve the value of homes. So, I mean, that's just a thought that I had when I was listening. Does anyone else want to weigh in on anything? Okay, so we have to decide, well, there is one item for consensus, at least right now, which is moving back on the impervious cover. Is that correct? Okay, so based on the changes that were submitted last meeting, that's one item on the third, I believe it's the second page of documents. So do we have a consensus on tabling the change of the, or not tabling, but reversing the 50% back to the 35%? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, we have four, I guess it would be votes, for consensus.
Can we get a motion, please?
Okay,
Thank
instead
you.
of consensus. May I have a motion from one of you four?
I make a motion that we forego the 50% impervious cover that we discussed last month and revert back to the 35% that is currently listed in the ordinance.
And is also in the draft.
And is also in the draft ordinance, correct.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? So we have a vote of 4-1 to go back to the 35%. Okay, so that takes care of that item. If there's nothing else that the commission has an issue with or that would like to discuss further, then I do believe that we will be moving this forward to City Council for their review in April. I think so.
I make a motion that the draft ordinance as written be forwarded to City Council for their...
With the change, with that change.
Correct, but this is forwarding the whole draft ordinance,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to pass on to City Council the draft ordinance with the changes that were outlined and the document that was given to us that was done by Bryce Cox, with the exception of the 35%. We moved the whole draft ordinance on to City Council for their April meeting. Is that correct? Did I get a second?
Are you recommending approval?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Next item is future agenda items. Would any of the commissioners like to suggest a future agenda item? If not, I do, and I would like to put on the agenda I'm sorry? You do? Okay.
Future.
Sorry.
I would like to, a future agenda item is actually go over some of the alternative ways, to go over some of the alternative ways to reduce rainwater and rain shed, because at the end of the day, we're only here for a temporary, and we got to think about future generations. Because of the area that we're on, how does rain harvesting, which is in Ordinance 54, can play into it. Other things that how we can share that with the public.
And with the Water Commission.
Yeah, and so they can definitely, the key is compliance, of course, with the Edwards Aquifer, and at the same token, make a place where people want to be a part of.
Marissa, did you get that? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, then I would also like to bring up and put on the agenda for the next meeting, discussion on future variances. Anyone else have any items? Okay. The next meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission will be on April 12th at 6 p.m. here in City Hall. Now I'd like to open it up for the second citizens' comment period. You do not have to have signed up to speak, but you now have, there's a total time of 20 minutes, and I think you get 2 minutes to speak. So if anyone would like to just come up and speak, and afterwards sign the sheet, please do so. Thank you. Now, I just have to make a clarification. Can they speak about what they've already spoken about?
If they spoke in the first citizen comment period, so that would be one citizen that spoke in that first citizen comment period, he cannot speak about the same thing during this.
Okay. So if as long as it's not the same thing you spoke on, and you have 2 minutes.
For during the public hearing, though, that doesn't count.
Okay,
It's
so
just the
you didn't
citizen.
speak on, we only had one speaker, so go ahead.
So my name's Robert Balch, 20592 Timber Rose, and we were talking about the parking, and you mentioned when the permit was occurred. When we filled out the permit to get an 80,000-pound driveway, I don't think it has the word motorhome on it, but that's a lot more than my pickup truck. So, and I'm just saying that. And then I think there's some people who had a driveway and parked their RV on it. And I know my house was built before Garbridge was a city, so there is no permit had I not replaced that driveway. Just saying that permit was a good idea, but I'm not sure it catches everybody. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak?
I'm Stephen Demery. I live at 9497 Cinchona Trail, and I would like.
Could you move this microphone closer to you so we can hear you?
Yeah, I would like to protest the changes to the ordinance my wife and I bought in Garden Ridge because of the rural nature of the neighborhood and the openness and the distance between neighbors, and the fact that there really wasn't very much to be argued about as far as whether you had a boat or anything else on your property, because you're so far away that it really didn't stand out. And that was what attracted us to Garden Ridge in the first place, was that it was rural in nature, and we felt like we wouldn't be imposed upon by our neighbors or the city council or anybody else. There was no HOA, and we felt like we were moving into a countrified neighborhood. And to have the rules changed after being there for 15 years or whatever, more maybe, I feel like it's unfair, and it's imposing on my rights that I assumed when I moved into the neighborhood because it was of a certain ambiance. So anyway, I'd like to protest that. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, then we'll close the citizen comment period. The last item is for adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
So you have to drive back to Austin right
No, I live in New Braunfels.
Everybody listening.
Yeah, I know. I harass Charlie and Dan both. I'm like, why do I have an office in New Braunfels? I go in every day.
Do I have to move?
Roxy lives in New Braunfels too.
Jeez. Yeah, I live in San Antonio. Makes sense.
Like
It's
Scott lives in
nice
San
out
Antonio too.
Yeah, and they
Because for a while he told me he was commuting to the Austin office. I was like, oh.
Well, the only ones, let's see. Well, Pat lives here, Larissa here, I live here.
Yeah.
And I guess Nikki lives here, the new attorney. Yeah. So.
And then we have most of the office staff in Austin lives in San Marcos.
That's right, they do. Because I talked with, let's see, okay, the office staff is
Jennifer.
And
Kim is billing.
Kim.
Yeah, and they both live in San Marcos.
Yeah, they both live in San Marcos.
Yes.
Now, where does?
And Meredith lives in